What up, YouTube?
For the old man.
That's right. Welcome to the channel, the Old Man Games channel. I'm your host, Old Man Games. You know what it is. And if you don't, get up to speed as quickly as you can. Hit that subscribe button. Bang on the like button. I got another one for you. In this episode, we are going to dive into player development. This is a follow-up to the fundamentals of recruiting, or the recruiting fundamentals episode that I dropped not too long ago. So in this bad boy,
no diddy, you know.
Similarly, we're going to cover 5 different areas that I have narrowed down for player development, similar to the 5 areas we have for recruiting. But the 5 areas here are going to be 1, coaching profile / attributes. I'm going to quickly spend some time there to show you what you need to be focused on and why. I covered some of this in the recruiting episode, but we need to cover it here so that this episode will be complete on its own. Second, we're going to go over scheduling. So similar to recruiting, there's a scheduling aspect to development, and I'm going to go more in depth in that here as to how you can use scheduling to assist with the development of your team, your program. Number 3 is going to be roster management. Again, another area that we touched on in the recruiting episode, but in this episode, yeah, we're going to cover some of the same things and just go into depth in certain sections, but just cover roster management as it relates specifically to player development. All right, so that includes roster cuts, redshirting, position changes, and playing time. And then number 4, we're going to go over training sessions. Mind you, again, I'm a computer versus computer focused, so I do training sessions. I will also cover drills briefly, but more than anything, I'll cover my approach and strategy to training sessions. And then number 5 is going to be pep talks. All right, we'll quickly go over that and how that can be used to help. So without further ado, let's hop into this bad boy. All right, so this first section we're going to cover here is going to be the coaching profile / attribute section. What's important here and why. Again, similar to the recruiting episode, for this we are going to use for examples the Texas Southern dynasty we have, which is a dynasty that you can check out on this Old Man Games channel. If you haven't already, you should definitely be up on this series we got going. I did episodes, or seasons I should say rather. Season 1 through 4 were 2 episodes apiece, as we just fast simulated through the seasons so that we can turn over the roster and rebuild with all of my recruited players. And then season 5 we just ended not too long ago. That's one where we went through the entire season here on YouTube and showed every single game, one game at a time, from preseason all the way through to the conference tournament. So yeah, go check that out if you haven't already. We're going to use that as an example, as well as an offline dynasty that I have with South Dakota State. So like I said, similarly to the recruiting episode. All right, so real quick, when it comes to your coaching profile and attributes, like I said, I covered this in the recruiting episode. Go check that out if you haven't already. It's a 3-hour banger. It's hella intense. Watch it on 2x if you need to, but I wouldn't really suggest that though when I think about it, because I have music in the background. So if you put it on 2x, it might not work so well. That's the only thing about having music in the back, but oh well, it is what it is. Still, go check that out. Yeah, so anyway, when it comes to your coach profile, here's the coach profile of the Texas Southern, or is it Texas?
Come on now, dog.
Yeah, it is Texas Southern. The Texas Southern dynasty we have with head coach Corey Felton, right? Now, when you look at his attributes, I'm not too far off from where I originally started, but as I mentioned on the recruiting episode, and I keep hammering that in. Again, go watch it if you haven't already. But teaching is the most important attribute as it relates to player development, okay? More so than offense and defense. Like, I ranked the order of these attributes or how you should look at it in that episode, but teaching, I want to say, is what I had at second behind charisma, and I think I had it at 1A and 1B if I remember correctly. Like, it's so close, it's so up there to the top. This is like one of the top things you could be focused on, because other than charisma, so think of it like this: charisma is what helps you bring players into your program. Teaching is what helps you help those players reach their full potential. Okay, so always make sure you keep an eye on teaching. You keep your as soon as you get points coming in, you want to make sure you focus that on charisma, which is recruiting, and then you also focus it on teaching, which is development. Scouting is for recruiting as well, but as long as you got a C here, you should be all right, and just keep improving that though. But scouting will lag these two. So just remember, I cannot emphasize that enough. Teaching is the best way from a coaching attribute standpoint that you help your kids advance and develop. So even if it doesn't say here, but I think when you go through the process of distributing your points in the beginning, it will tell you about what teaching is and what it is. But I just want to emphasize and hammer that in, all right? So that's the quick section on that right now. On to the next section. All right, so here we are on the next section. So similar to the recruiting, the second area you want to think about when it comes to player development is scheduling, okay? So I mentioned this briefly in the recruiting episode, and again, we're going to dive more deeply into it here. When it comes to scheduling, there are several things you should consider and think about when you put your schedule together as it relates to developing your team. All right, so here's a few things. One is you want to try as best you can. Now, we already mentioned the Sunday rule that you need to be aware of, not scheduling games on Sunday, right? That's more about recruiting, because I don't hinder your recruiting efforts. But in addition to that, when it comes to the level of play, what you want to try to do is two main things. One is you want to balance it out. So meaning you don't want to put, and what I'm more speaking to your non-conference schedule, right? Because in your options, make sure you put it on customized schedule so that you get to customize your schedule. But then also, when you do customize your schedule, see, like, this is something I would call unbalanced. One thing you want to try to achieve with your non-conference scheduling is balance. The reason why this is so off balance, and again, if you don't know, this is the Texas Southern Dynasty we're using as an example here. But the reason why this would be considered an off-balance schedule is because, look, there's way more away games than anything else. Way more away games than home games. Then I would even say it's unbalanced in terms of big-time programs versus smaller programs. Northern Arizona is a smaller program. Illinois State is a smaller program. Providence and UCF in this game is somewhere in between. Probably just below Arizona State, Colorado State, Oklahoma State, Tennessee. But the point that I'm trying to make is that this is kind of off balance, and what you want to try to achieve with your schedule is a nice balance where, well, actually, so both in terms of home and away games and neutral, and I'm gonna get into that pretty soon, but also in terms of the caliber. So you don't want to play all really tough teams, and you don't want to play all cupcakes. Make sure there's a mix of difficult teams that you should easily beat, and teams that is a toss-up. It could go either way.
No problem. I hear you. That's cool.
So that's what you want to think about in terms of the level. And the reason why is this, and especially for computer versus computer. Now, when you're controlling everything yourself on the sticks, you could come up with a different strategy, or you could apply the same strategy, but it'd probably be for different reasons. The reason why I'm applying this for CPU versus CPU is because the computer coach is controlling your substitutions, right? And if you follow and you watch the Texas Southern Dynasty, how it plays out in the games, if you notice in the games where my team, the team that I'm managing, when my team is blowing out the opponent, what the computer coach will do is substitute the bench players in there. So it ends up being a thing where in some cases, if it's a big time blowout, the bench players end up playing more minutes than the starters, because the starters will get pulled out real early, right? So, and that's totally fine. I'm okay with that. It's just you don't want to have your schedule be lopsided to where that's happening all the time. You get what I'm saying? And then on the reverse of that, in the games where you're playing difficult opponents, where you're really struggling to get to the lead, or you keep the lead, or you're behind because you're playing a really tough team, in those situations your bench players will rarely play, especially depending on where you put that bench depth slider that's on the that's on the coach profile. But even when you have that on high, when it's a close game or when you're playing tough opponents, chances are your starters will get more time. So, and then the more time your players play, the more experience they get, and the more that they can develop based on that experience. Or think of it as the better chance they have at reaching their full potential. Okay, so that's why I say when it comes to development, the scheduling is important because you want to have that balance in there where, especially for computer versus computer, forgive me for repeating, but I have to emphasize these things, right? Then lastly, the other component about your scheduling is if you don't know, you should know. You see where it says add season tourney? There are preseason tournaments. I highly, highly, highly recommend and suggest every year you include and schedule a preseason tournament. All right. At the most, I would say schedule 2. So don't do any more than 2. And at the least, always a minimum of 1 preseason tournament. If you do 2, schedule 1 in the month of November and schedule 1 in the month of December. And here's the reason why I say always, and this is whether you're doing CPU versus CPU or whether you're controlling the sticks yourself, whether you're doing fast sim, doesn't matter. Always schedule preseason tournaments. And the reason why is I feel, this is my own personal belief based on me playing. I played this game like a lot. I put thousands of hours into this game, y'all. Over maybe like the decade, going on 2 decades that this game has been out. But when you play preseason games with your teams, especially if you win those preseason tournaments, when you play preseason tournaments with your teams, especially when you win those preseason tournaments, like the whole tournament, that will come back to pay dividends later on in the season for you when you go to postseason play, right? So the preseason tournaments help you in postseason tournaments. I don't know if y'all know that or if you realize it, and especially if you win, it gives your team a bit of it makes you much more competitive in the postseason tournaments, because the postseason tournaments are like the competitiveness of those games are ratcheted up a notch. And essentially what I'm saying to you is the way to prepare your team for that well in advance is get them into the preseason games. Another thing too is front loading to an extent. So basically is this. So your preseason games, you want to schedule at least somewhere between, I would say, 10 to 12 games total. Your preseason tournaments are going to take up at least 2 games because there are going to be at least 2 rounds. The bigger tournaments may be 3 rounds. There may be even some that'll take up 4 rounds, which basically means 4 games, right? Or sometimes, it means 4 games. But anyway, so what I'm saying is you want to schedule a total of 12 games, right? If you don't do a split, meaning 6 in November and 6 in December, what you want to do is have more games played in November than December. I'm not sure. I'm not gonna lie. I get my wires crossed between this. There's a college basketball game. I can't remember the name. What I'll try to do is flash it on the screen when I go back and edit this. I can't remember the name of it. I do remember the company that makes it. I want to say the company is called Grey Dog Sports or Grey Dog Software. I'm sorry, Grey Dog Software. It's the same company that makes the game. Oh damn, I can't even remember that game. They make a MMA game, but it's like a text-based simulation game. I'm thinking about bringing it to the channel eventually at some point, but I got my hands full at the moment. But anyway, like I said, I'll flash it on the screen, but it's a text-based basketball game, and it's very similar to this, just without the graphics. It's all text, and I get my wires mixed up sometimes, but that game is very closely based on this, right? So, and like I said, sometimes I get my wires crossed. I am old, y'all, so I'll be forgetting, but I applied the same thing to both. I'm just saying where I read once where the scheduling helps with your player development. So basically, you don't want to come through this and schedule all cupcakes, because that's not going to help you. You don't want to, also on the flip side, on the other extreme, you don't want to schedule all really difficult teams. That's not going to help you either. You want to have a mix of difficult and easy. And like I said, you want to include preseason tournaments, so you make your team competitive and used to playing tournament play, where it's like, you know, elimination go home or elimination play in the losers bracket. You want to get them used to that. And then the other thing is you want to front load November, because the games that they play help with their development. So get them through more games earlier in the season will help them develop faster in the season, is what I'm telling you. Because when it comes to the player development, they develop throughout the season as well as in the off season. Okay, so as an example right here, this isn't going to be the real deal Holyfield like in the actual franchise, because I've already gone through that and have recorded it, and it'll be released at a different time. But I'm going to go through right now and fix up this schedule and show you. So this is the schedule that originally it opened up to. So basically I'm saying that the computer generated schedule. I'm going to pause the video right now and tweak it and come up with a makeshift schedule. Again, this is for the Texas Southern Dynasty, where we just won 20 games. We went 20-11. We're going into season 6. I'm gonna pause and come up with a fake schedule that will be an example of what that will encompass all the principles that I've been speaking of. All right, so I'm gonna pause right now, come up with the schedule, and I'll come back and speak to it. All right, so we're back. I've gone through and I've optimized the schedule to reflect all of the strategies and talking points that I just mentioned. All right, so this is what an optimized schedule will look like for my team. First of all, there are no Sunday games, right? Next, you can see, okay, we're playing now between the month of November and December, where our non-conference games are. We got 1, 2, 3, 4 away games. We got 1, 2, 3, 4 home games, and we got 2 tournaments. Okay, each tournament has 2 rounds, so those are 2. Each of these represents 2 games apiece. So in total, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so again, I said you want to at least do a minimum of 10, maximum of 12. Never do, I don't care how many conference games you play, never do less than 10 non-conference games. All right, and I don't even think they'll let you do more than 12 non-conference games. You could try it, but I wouldn't. 12 is the max. All right, so this is basically an optimized schedule. If you look at the 4 away games we have, they're against higher echelon opponents. Tennessee, Arizona State. They're from bigger conferences than what our team is. Again, this is the Texas Southern Dynasty. So Tennessee, Arizona State, Oklahoma State are three of the away games. Then the reason I left this Illinois State game here is, if you notice, I tried to swap it to a I tried to swap it to a home game because it's an away game. And when I did that, the computer gave me a message saying that my team is not prestigious enough to bring Illinois State to a home court. So I didn't say F you, I just kept them, right? Because that just means that they are a higher prestige team than what we are. And that's the whole point of these away games. These away games are with teams at a higher level, which is going to be better competition, which is going to help bring out the best on our team. Then we got, I wouldn't necessarily say cupcakes, but the home teams, that the non-conference games that we're playing at home are against teams that are either on the same level as us in terms of their conference and their team prestige, or at a lower level, which is why we're even able to schedule them at home, right? And then the third piece I want to emphasize about this schedule that I optimized is, if you notice, there is either an equal or more amount of games in November. There's more games in November than December. There's 7 total games in November and 5 games in December. Back to what I was saying about how you kind of want to front load. You want to play more games earlier as you head into your non-conference schedule so that you can help develop. All right, so if you see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games in November, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games in December. So that's how we optimize this 12-game conference schedule, all right? And that's how you use scheduling to help with player development. On to the next section. All right, so I've hopped over to the South Dakota State franchise we have going, and we're going to dive into the roster management portion of the tutorial. Similarly to recruiting and roster development, roster management is extremely critical and extremely important. And I've broken this down and I've identified 4 main sections of roster management that you need to be aware of and things you need to utilize. I'll just call them out and we can talk over them briefly, but those 4 areas are roster cuts, which I go into deeply in the recruiting guide that we have. It's a 3-hour long tutorial. I tried to put chapters in there so you can go directly to it, but I talked in that episode about the importance of roster cuts, making roster cuts when necessary, especially when taking over a new program for the first time. There may need to be players on your roster that you need to cut to free up space, both whether it's a walk-on and definitely especially for scholarship players. Oh, you know what? Speaking of walk-ons, let's make that a 5th section. So I called out 4. I said roster cuts, red shirting, position changes, and playing time. A 5th for roster management will be walk-ons. Okay. So I'm gonna put that in my notes right now. Hold up 1 second. So walk-ons are definitely instrumental to I would say this, walk-ons are instrumental to the development of your program, especially when you start with lower level programs. And remember, like I was saying in recruiting, on the recruiting episode, and I'm gonna keep referring to that throughout this episode. So if that bothers you, get over it, because these 2 things are linked, and I couldn't have that episode, that video, go beyond the 3 hours that it already went. So I have a second video, this video here, dedicated to development. But these 2 things are heavily tied together, development and recruiting. But the point that I'm making here is this: on your when it comes to the walk-ons, on the recruiting, remember how I said in the recruiting, you're recruiting against yourself because you don't want to bring in a recruit that's rated lower than a walk-on, right? That's one thing. But then also too, you want to keep walk-ons on your team and develop them and have them. That's like the floor. Remember, with anything, you're only as strong as your weakest link. But walk-ons can. So for instance, here's a good analogy example. In the Texas Southern dynasty we have going, as we're building up that dynasty, we had to cut some players who had scholarships so that we can go replace them with higher quality scholarship players, right? And in the interim, as we were building, we had walk-ons that were better than some recruits. We kept those walk-ons, cut the recruits, and those walk-ons have proved to be really instrumental. They get playing time, they help us, they've been developing, and they're critical pieces of our program that we're building. All right, so that's why walk-ons are instrumental to roster management, and you shouldn't overlook that. Same with roster cuts. And then redshirting. Okay, obviously, I want to say obvious, but it may not be obvious to everyone. So when you first start the season, you see how you have this first week. You got this first week to really fill everything out before the redshirt deadline. But what I want to say is this: you always want to, and this is a part of roster management. You always want to know the players that you can redshirt, right? So, like for instance, in this example, in this latest recruiting class on the on the South Dakota State franchise, this guy right here, Jarrett Wilkes, we actually brought in a junior college player. He's real low. I didn't cut him. I actually might cut him, but for now, I'm just gonna redshirt him. His overall is a 56. Actually, I think we should cut this guy, because overall he's not gonna be able to help us. But you know what? It's okay. I'm gonna redshirt him. So he's gonna be redshirted. Who else in this? This Sam Peterson. He's a freshman shooting guard. He's a 68 overall, but you see, he has other small forwards and a bunch of shooting guards in front of him who are sophomores and seniors, so there's really no reason he's not going to get that much playing time, right? Even though he's coming in at a decent level as a freshman, a 68. But just imagine, by the time he gets to his junior season, his redshirt junior season, which will be his true senior season, and then his 5th year senior, he's going to be really good for the team. So redshirting is a way that you can get an extra year of development for your recruits. So don't underestimate redshirting. And when you get to the point in your dynasty where you have enough depth, enough players that, you know, look, before I get to him, I have 1, 2, and this is beyond position, just in terms of all guards, forwards, everything. But I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 9 players that are rated higher than this freshman before I get to him, right? So that's a whole rotation. Then there's guys after him at around the same level, or no, just one guy after him at around the same level. So that's a whole 10. That's 10 players right there. That's a whole 2 rotations, meaning I don't need this freshman, his true freshman season. I don't need him. Point blank period. So I'm not gonna burn and waste his year when I can really hold him back and develop him for an extra year, right? Especially, check this out, he's a shooting guard, right? Freshman shooting guard. On this squad, here's another freshman shooting guard. So I don't want 2 freshman shooting guards. Even though I had to recruit 2 freshman shooting guards in the same freshman class, they don't have, this is a way to separate them in class. So I'm showing you the usefulness of a red shirt. This is a way to separate them in class, the two freshman shooting guards that I have, because they can't both play that same position at the same time. Even though I could at some point move one over to the 3 spot or to the 1, and they can play at the same time like that, but still, you get what I'm saying. Then check this out. As I go up this roster some more, here's 2 more shooting guards I have on the roster, a sophomore and a senior. So there's really no way that I need that 4th shooting guard who's a freshman. You see that? And then guess what? This helps in the recruiting effort, because this guy right here, Tommy Faye, he's a senior shooting guard, right? Meaning this is going to be an open scholarship that I'm recruiting for in this recruiting session, in this recruiting round, right? But guess what? Guess what I don't have to do? I don't have to press myself for a shooting guard. I can study my team and study the available recruits and go after something totally different to make this team much more dynamic. And the reason why is because I already have a shooting guard, his replacement, who's sitting on the bench getting an extra year of development. So when he leaves, I got a guy who's gonna already be a redshirt freshman next year, ready to go, and he's been in our program for a year already with the extra development. All right, so I'm saying this and I'm trying to drill it in. Make sure you utilize redshirting. You always want to, if you can, study your roster and redshirt some players, okay? That's only going to help your program in the long haul, and it's only going to help the player that you redshirt with his development. Same thing with walk-ons. When I talk about how you should be utilizing walk-ons in your program, if you notice, look, let's check this out on this South Dakota at this point in this South Dakota State franchise I have going, every player on this roster I've brought on the team. That's how many years I've been simulating with this now. I've completely turned over the roster, right? But check this out. If you look at the red shirts, if you look at the walk-ons that are on this roster, every single walk-on has what? What do you see that's in common with all the walk-ons? They all have red shirt years. So that's another thing. Automatically, any red shirt that I decide to keep, any walk-on that I decide to keep on my roster, he's automatically gonna be redshirted. There is no reason to ever not redshirt a walk-on player. You catch my drift? So that, just to tie in these two sections of the roster management section, the section about redshirting and the section about walk-ons and how walk-ons can help with your program and the overall long-term development of your program. Always, whenever you decide to keep a walk-on on your team, unless you need him to start, unless you need that walk-on to start, you should always redshirt that walk-on. Okay? So that's one of my rules. And then the scholarship players, the rule for that is, if there's at least two other guys at that same position, and in this case I got three other guys, if there's at least two other guys at that same position, you don't need that freshman, he can redshirt, okay? So that's those two things, and I already covered cutting players, so what's next? Position changes. So one thing you need to do as well is always study your team, right? And study, you can see these numbers, these are their attributes, but these numbers, this up arrow with this number, that's showing their development, right? This is their progress or their progression in these given categories of their attributes. So the name of the game is you want these guys increasing in certain attributes, especially the attributes that make sense for your program. Like for instance, remember I said with my program, we want like a D and 3 thing. We want our players to be good at defense and good with 3-pointers, right? Well, check it out. On this team that I'm building, here's their 3-point shooting. And this is how they're developing in that area. So you see, I'm always looking at how the team is developing and how they're going, and I'm trying to get them to be better in certain areas that correspond with the style of play that I'm trying to build. Another thing we focus on is defense. We try to have good defense, and this also helps you when it comes to roster management. Evaluating your roster this way, where you go through, look at the team, at the roster, and you look through their attributes and you sorting through, this helps you realize where your strengths and weaknesses are on your team to help keep your team dynamic. You see what I'm saying? Like there might be certain things you lack that you need, right? Like for instance, if I'm looking at this team, I say, okay, we got 2 guys who can block fairly well, a 6'7" senior power forward and a center at 6'10". We might want to make sure we can recruit another guy who can block, a rim protector, especially with this guy being a senior. You see what I'm saying? So that's the way I look at my roster to determine what I need. It's more than just I am looking at on the surface level the positions that are graduating in a given year, but I'm also looking deeper than that. I'm looking at attributes, right? Like here's another example, handling. Okay, we got a guy right here, Trevor Dean, a sophomore point guard, the best handler and he's the best passer as well, right? He's a sophomore. the next best handler behind him is a senior. So this is telling me, guess what? I need to make sure I get some better ball handlers, some better point guards. Also, too, with this guy, no, he was a point guard. That's fine. I can keep him. That was the reason why I decided to keep this junior. I'm on the fence with him. Normally, I kind of would have dropped a guy like him, but his passing and handling is in the mid 70s, and I think he can probably get to the 80, especially since I'm redshirting him. So I'll have 2 years with him. He'll be a redshirt junior next year, and these two things will be closer to 80. He'll at least go up one. I'm pretty sure in both those areas, and I'll show you what I'm gonna do to try to help make that happen. But point that I'm trying to make is you look at those things. You look at also with the attributes. You're looking at players who can change positions. I'm trying to think. Let me check my notes real quick for this team to see. I know there were some players on this squad that I did change their positions, so I just want to find them and speak to them. Oh, okay. For instance, this guy right here, Dylan Sagdazi, right? We have on our team. He's a small forward. Now, it doesn't show it. You wouldn't see this because I didn't record it as I was building up this franchise offline, but this guy was originally a shooting guard that we recruited onto the team. We got him in as a shooting guard, and then I moved him over to small forward because there were other shooting guards that I had that could shoot better than him. You know what I mean? That I felt like were better than him at the 2 guard spot. But he had certain attributes that I like at the 3 guard, where I can move him over and he can still be effective for us. And now he's our starting small forward as a senior. You know what I mean? And he has like a lot of the things that we like. Let me see. One of the things I was looking for. Oh yeah, he's speed. You see, one of the things I like on my teams are good speed. His speed is at 86. And that, like, finding really fast small forwards is kind of hard sometimes, but there's faster shooting guards, you know what I mean? And if you take a shooting guard that's fast and move him over to small forward, you now have a matchup advantage against other small forwards because he's much faster than most small forwards that you're going to find. You see what I'm saying? So that's one of the things that you can use to your advantage when you look at changing positions of the players. And that's just the point that I'm trying to emphasize here. When it comes to roster management, don't overlook the importance of changing players, and the way that you find really good players that can change is to study the attributes of the players. All right, study height and all that, and you can find players that can move around to be optimized at better positions that'll really help your team, their development and your team's development. Okay, and then the last area that I want to mention as it comes to roster management is the piece about playing time. Now, if you recall, on the recruiting episode we did, on the recruiting tutorial, when we spoke on coaching profile, one of the things we spoke about was this thing right here, bench depth, right? Which is one of the things I said is a variable. It fluctuates. It goes up and down based on who you got on your roster. But one thing you want to keep in mind is you want to try to get all the players, if you can, try to get all the players on your team to get playing time throughout the season. This goes back to what I was saying about the scheduling piece, right? Where you want to schedule teams that will allow your backup players to get in the game and get playing time too. You know what I'm saying? So those are the things that you want to keep in mind when it comes to playing time. Playing time helps with development. That kind of goes without saying. You can't develop if you just sit on the bench all day. That's in real life too, right? So try to get all of your players to get some kind of time throughout the season, to the extent possible, because it will only help with their development. All right, so I think that's about all for the roster management piece. We can go on to the next section of this tutorial, and I'll catch you on that side. Okay, so we're still here in the South Dakota State franchise or legacy, whatever you want to call it. You know, like I said, I use those interchangeable. And we're going to talk about training sessions, right? Now we're getting into the real meat of this tutorial and the powwow. This is where the good stuff is. I mean, not to down talk the others. The other stuff was good, but the other stuff was also kind of touched upon in the recruiting. When it comes to this training session piece, I didn't really go on this at all, touch on this at all in the recruiting. And I got some tips and tricks here for you, okay? So one of the how can I put this? The beginning of your season is super critical to the success of the season, and if you can stay consistent with this, with what it's like having a morning routine. Think about it as the beginning of the season routine. If you can develop and be consistent with a beginning of the season routine, which I'm going to go over with you right now, then overall in the long term, that's going to help the development of your program and the players within it. Okay, so the way you do that is this. Remember, these first 2 weeks, well, really, I would say these first 2 weeks, but yeah, for sure. These first 2 weeks are critical to the setup of your season for the team. Now, this first week, you got a lot going on. I talked about previously in the recruiting episode how once you land on this first week, one of the first things you want to do from a recruiting standpoint, didn't mean to do that. One of the first things you want to do from a recruiting standpoint is reestablish your target list, right? But then when it comes to managing your program, another thing you want to do is you get ready for the internal scrimmage, right? The Midnight Madness. I don't think I showed that on season 5 of the Texas Southern Dynasty we got going, but in this next upcoming season for season 6, I did show how I play out those games. So stay tuned for that. Follow up on that. It's pretty dope. But you can play these or not. Sometimes I do play them, especially when I'm trying to fill out the new team that I just put together, as well as certain plays in the playbook. So this can be very useful to you just to gain more information on the new team that you just put together, right? So definitely pay attention. I would say it's not a deal breaker, but it can definitely help, all right? So pay attention to this Midnight Madness game. Then another thing too is this week is important because of what I mentioned before about identifying players that you want to redshirt. That's also kind of where this Midnight Madness game comes into play. You can watch this game, especially for me, like for all of you out there who are CPU versus CPU like me, you can watch this, or even if you play the game, with the sticks, you can watch or play this game to get a feel for the new incoming freshmen or incoming players onto your squad that can help you determine whether or not they need to be redshirted. You feel what I'm saying? So that's why this comes into play in conjunction with your red shirt. But again, just reiterating the importance of what you need to be paying attention to at the beginning of the season. Now, here's what I'm getting to. On here, if you go to coaching office, you can see there's, from there, 3 drops down, development. And within development, there's several menus that you need to familiarize yourself with. Now, if you play CPU versus CPU like me, I don't use everything here. So these bonus drills, they have drills that you can go through. And now you would be playing this on the sticks, and being that I'm not a stick player anymore, again, I'm too old, I'm retired, y'all. I told y'all about that already. I don't necessarily utilize this, but for those of you who do, this is a way to help build up your team, basically. And this is a more targeted way to do it. So you get 2 bonus drills. You see how right here it says drills left 2. You get 2 bonus drills per week throughout the season. You can pick a player and pick a drill and go through that drill to try to earn points. Again, I don't use this, but I'm speaking on it to make you aware that if you do want to use it, that's another way to help build up your players. Now, here's what I do use is the training. This is where it's at, okay? Now, this is a way where you can set individual customized training programs for every one of your player for every week of the season. And you have to do this. It's critically important. Listen to what I'm saying. It's critically important that you do this at the right time, because if you don't, it's going to be set at this balance. You're going to miss weeks where you don't get to set it. Basically, it won't be customized. So by default, everything is set on balance. And you can go through each of the players on your team here, right? Now, here's how I do this, because this can be a very time-consuming exercise to go through and set individual training programs for your entire team. But being that I have a coaching style, I have a play style that I have in mind, a way I want my team to play, there's a way that you can do this to make it faster. You can sort of streamline the process. So if you see, you can scroll through, you go through all the players on your team, but then also there's a spot right here where after you go through all the players, it says team. And this is basically, think of this as a global setting. So everything I set on this screen, right on this team screen, would apply to each individual player on my team. Get it? So when it's time for me to set up the training, what I do is this. On week 1, I come here, I go to the team screen, because this is gonna apply to all my players, and I set up, so for each week, you got 3 sections that you can set up various training on, right? I utilize these 2 sections on the global settings, and I'm gonna show you how. So one thing we want to do is we want to make sure we are a fast team that can run and get up and down the floor, right? That's a part of our playing style. So most of our conditioning is going to use this icon right here, which is like a running icon that helps with your speed and stamina. I believe your stamina, right? And then on the second one, on every block, one thing that's big for my team is defense. Remember, like I said, my team strategy, we use a full court man-to-man press. So athleticism is real important. Remember when I was stressing out in the recruiting episode? Well, defense is extremely important for us as well, right? So when it comes to the global setting, I go through and I set this up where most of the weeks is that running icon. I will sprinkle in the other 2 here and there, and then every single one of these second training slots is set on defense. All right, so I'm gonna pause real quick right now. I'm gonna go through and set this all up. I'm gonna come back and talk through it. All right, hold up. Okay, so I'm back. I went through quickly and I set again. I'm working on the team screen. So this is the global settings. Everything I set here is going to apply to all my players, right? So what I do on the initial setup, and again, we are a run dominant team. So everything in the second slot all the way down is going to be defense. And the way I do this on this slot, the conditioning slot, I do run, and this is mobility, it's called. Like if you look at it here, the 3 options, you have mobility. This says mobility, you have strength, that's the weight icon, and you have durability. Okay, so every time you see this shoe with the wing icon, that's mobility. So when we go to our conditioning, the way I do it is I do 3 weeks of mobility, 1, 2, 3. Then I do a week of durability and then a week of strength. Again, this is the global setting. This applies to everybody, right? And then this second one is on all these is all defense. These are your options that you can set on the second one. The same options will apply to this first one, but on the global settings, I leave this open, right? So all I do is for every week, I set these 2, right? And remember, this one right here is mobility 3 times, mobility, then durability, then strength. So that's 5 weeks, right? And this will tell you what week you're on. Then when I get toward the bottom, I switch this up a little bit. So after week 20, so I do it 4 times where I do mobility 3, then durability, then strength. That's a week. I do that up until week 20. And then for the last 3 or the last 4 weeks, I just switch it up to where it's mobility, durability, strength, then mobility on the last week. But you see, every second thing here is defense, and then I alternate those based on what I just said, right? And I'm doing this on the team screen. So now, when I go back over here, when I scroll through the team, you see how now I'm scrolling through each of the players, but now they have their training regimen are set based on what I set on the global settings. You see that? And then this from here, now when I go through to set my individual training regimens for each of my players, it's going to be much simpler because 2 of the weeks are already filled in. And then for my front court players, meaning my centers and my power forwards, what I do is I'll exchange some of these durability icons for more strength icons. Like I may add 3 or 4 more strength icons for my front court players because I need them to be a bit more stronger, even though I still need them to be mobile to run up and down the court. So for instance, so once I do that, this is how I'll do mine. Like I said, first thing I do is I set the team screen. Then as you scroll through your team from, if you use the L2 and R2 button, I go from right to left. So right now I'm gonna hit R2 to scroll through my team like this. It goes through your starting lineup through your bench. So for instance, I'm on the team page, right? As I press R2, this is my starting point guard, T Dean. R2 again, that's my starting 2 guard, T Fries. R2 again, that's my starting small forward. R2 again, that's my starting power forward. R2 again, that's my starting center. Right? R2 again, that's number 6 on my bench. R2 again, that's not, you see what I'm saying? So it goes like that in order. So once I set the team screen, then I go down and I set my individual training for each player. So this guy is a point guard, right? So for my point guards, what's big for me is like awareness and skill. Sometimes, real quick, sometimes too, also for like the sake of efficiency and speed, another thing I'll do, let me go back to the team screen. On this team screen, I'll do this where for the first 3 weeks across the board for my team, I want everybody to be aware and I want everybody to have some level of basic skill, right? So what I'll do is and this is across the board, the global settings, 2 weeks of awareness training followed by 2 weeks of skills training in the beginning of the season. So that's the first 4 weeks. Then I'll go to the last 4 weeks and do the same thing on the last, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so on the last 4 weeks for everybody, there will be 2 weeks of awareness and 2 weeks of skills, right? So this is the global setting for everybody. So everybody gonna have that. So now I'll go to my point guard, my starting point guard, right? And he has the first 4 weeks like I have for everybody. And then I'm just gonna go through it and all these, this one just means balance. I'm gonna fill in all these balance icons for each of the week, but I'm gonna make it player specific. So for my point guard, he's gonna have a lot of skill training throughout the year, right? So that can help with his, this is what it focuses on. It tells you right here. So skills training focus on ball handling and passing. So my point guards are gonna have a lot of skills training. Right, so this is my starting point guard. See, everybody has awareness training the first 2 weeks, which again, awareness training covers, if we go up here, this will tell you what awareness training covers. Offense awareness, defensive awareness, consistency, and clutch. All right, so then after that, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sessions of skills training. Then for my point guard, I want my point guard to be able to shoot as well. So shooting is going to cover medium shots, 3-pointers, free throws, and offensive dribbling. So I'm going to put a whole bunch of shooting on there for him. My shooting guards, this third row, other than the ones that are set for the global settings, like the 4 weeks of awareness and skills training, my shooting guards get all shooting. You get what I'm saying? So I'm not going to show all of that here, but that's the way that I go through and organize my training. But this is what I will say, at the beginning of every season, before I simulate one day, I go through and I set this up for every single player on my team. It's a painstaking process that can take quite a bit of time, but when you do this consistently, it pays dividends. Trust me when I tell you. So again, the best way to do this so you save a lot of time is you work it by working this team screen and you set up the thing like I said, and then you go back, and then you, keep this in mind. Once you set one person, that's why this thing kept coming up. Once you set, after you set up the global screen, think of it like this. Once you set the global screen, and then you go to a person, like I came to my point guard and I started individualizing or customizing his, at that point, I can't go back to make any changes to the global screen. If I do, all this that I put on him is going to get erased. So remember that. Once you set your global first and set it to where you don't need to change it no more before you start customizing the individual players. So that's an important point that I wanted to stress, okay? So you need to know that and keep it in mind. But also too, very important is, again, at the beginning of the season, that's why think of it as just like a morning ritual. Think of it as a beginning of the season ritual. You do not simulate one day before you set your training schedule. So the very first things you want to do when you get to a new season, I talked about one of the things in the recruiting episode, which is, again, reset your target list. But then also when it comes to the team you're managing, excuse me, my voice is messing up. When it comes to the team you're managing, you want to make sure you come in here and you set the training for everybody throughout the season. And then as the season progresses, as you watch your team play, let's say if you got one of your guards, his shooting is off, you can come here and put more shooting on his training. Or if he's having a lot of turnovers, and I'm just saying as an example, you can still come here to tweak and adjust, right? But know too though that like once I simulate one day, I won't be able to come back to make any changes to this week. That week could be done. I think even the second week, all right? So it's very critical that you set that up first before you simulate anything, okay? I can't stress that enough. So that's the training session piece. We're going to come back with the final section. I'll go through it really quick. It's not that long. And then we'll wrap things up for this tutorial. All right, let's get it. Okay, so for the final section, this is the pep talk section. We flip back over here to the Texas Southern legacy. And I'll show you here using this one as an example. So as you make your way through the actually, I'm not sure if I can show you here. As you make your way through the season, one of the things you have at your disposal is the pep talk option, which again, that's from coaching office, management, pep talks, okay? Pep talks help with your player strategy. So sometimes like this guy right here, Mencio, his confidence level, if I said strategy, I meant confidence. His confidence level is real low. It's down to 31%, but you can see it tracks how many pep talks. You get 10 total pep talks throughout the year, by the way, that you can use. So we've already used 5 on him. We use 1 on this guy and 1 on that guy. So in this dynasty, I have 3 more pep talks to use, but I think I'm at a point in the season where, I can't use anymore, so I can't even use it. But the way I manage my pep talks throughout the year, I don't just automatically throw them at players. As you make your way through the season, if a player is disgruntled about his playing time or anything like that, pep talks can be used to help keep him engaged and keep him, where he wants to stay with your program instead of wanting to transfer. The reason why I mention that, and I mention this here as it relates to player development, a couple things. One is, you can't develop the player if he transfers, right? So you want to make sure you keep him happy enough to stay with you so that you can continue to develop him. That's one aspect of this. The other aspect of it is it helps with your player's performance, which also helps with their development. Like for instance, sometimes like this guy, our freshman, Zeb Perry, freshman point guard, throughout the season, if you go back and watch season 5, you see how I have a pep talk for him? There was one point through the season where his confidence started to wane. It was like under 85%, which for your starting point guard, that's kind of low, right? And so I came and I used a pep talk on him to boost his confidence so that he can start playing better in the games, which in turn will also help with his development. So don't underestimate the use of pep talks and how that can help play a part in your player development, because they can keep your players on your team and they can keep their confidence up, which will help their performance, which will in turn help their attributes develop. All right, but then at the same time too, you remember you only get 10 in the season, and so you figure, like, the way I look at it is, I'm gonna need at least, you got to know your team too, right? But I'm gonna need at least about 5 of those just to keep players happy, and then the other 5, I'm just, watching my players' performance, checking on them, making sure their confidence levels are up. I want to say you want to monitor your starters, make sure their confidence stays above 80 at the least. But so if you see a starter whose confidence dropped below 80, that could be a good time to use a pep talk point on that player. All right, so that's pretty much it, y'all. Those are the 5 areas of player development that you will need to master in order to get the full potential out of your players. Oh, you know what? Before we wrap this up, there's one last piece I want to speak to. One last piece. This is also sort of related to recruiting, so this is the last tie to recruiting as well. But when you're recruiting players and you're thinking about players to bring onto your team, one thing you want to look at, and if I didn't mention this in the recruiting episode, forgive me. I may have mentioned it, I may have just brushed over it, but there's a part of recruiting that also plays into development, and that's potential. All right, so you want to also keep an eye on potential when you're recruiting, because the higher the player's potential, the more in terms of the number, and the faster that they're gonna develop and progress throughout their career in your program. So try to recruit for players with good potential. Good potential meaning a B and above, and a B meaning higher than B minus. So if they have B minus, that's fine. Like, if you look at this team, this Texas Southern team, I'll show you the potential of the players. We got a B here. Walter Seed, our shooting guard, his potential is a D. We got B minus, C, C plus, a few Ds. So it's a mixed bag. This guy who got an F, this is a walk-on. This W right here signifies walk-on. This gray shirt just signifies red shirt. So that's just a walk-on we have. So I wouldn't expect much potential out of him. But most of our scholarship players are a B or a C. Some of them are Ds, but hey, that happens. It gets better as you get better. But alright guys, I think that's about it for this tutorial, the player development tutorial. Again, quick recap. The 5 areas you want to master in order to get the most out of your player development. That's your coaching profile / attributes. Focus on that teaching attribute. That'll do it. Number 2 is the scheduling. You want to make sure you have balanced schedules in place. That's both balanced in terms of strength of schedule, home and away games, and having preseason tournaments. All that plays into it. Number 3 is roster management. Again, you want to be able to optimize the management of your rosters. We broke that down into several areas, including roster cuts, red shirting, position changes, walk-ons, and playing time. Those are the areas you want to focus on for roster management. Then we had training sessions. I went through and showed you a strategy behind how you can quickly and efficiently optimize your training sessions and the point of the season that you want to do that. And then lastly, finally, we covered pep talks and how you can utilize that within your player development strategy. All right, so it's been a good one, man. I felt like I breezed through it. Drop me a comment down below. Y'all ain't been dropping too many comments on that recruiting episode, y'all. What's going on? Let me know what you think. Give me some feedback. Let me know if I missed anything. I don't believe I did, but we can discuss it. All right, y'all. So you know who it is.
For the old man.
That's right. It's me. We'll see you on the next one. Until the next time. Peace.